This week's Torah portion is Parshas Chayei, and there's a lot of fascinating stories of our ancestors, and the main theme of this week's Parsha is Sarah passes away. That's why it's called Chayei, the life of Sarah, which ends in the beginning of the Parsha. And then the main theme is talking about how Avraham sends his servant, his helper Eliezer, to go find a wife for his son Isaac, Yitzchak, and that's mainly what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so first Torah kicks off. Sarah's lifetime was 127 years old, and she dies, and now Avraham wants to find a proper, respectful, worthy burying place for her. So there's a lot of options, pretty desolate land in those days. But he wants to choose this place, Machpelah, the cave of Machpelah, which is in Hebron in Israel, in Kiryat Arba, Hebron area. And he knows its value. He knows there was some special holiness to that particular location, but he bought it from Ephron, son of Zohar, who did not necessarily know its value, but still took the opportunity to take advantage of a Jew, as one does, and overcharge him a tremendous amount for this cave. Okay? So just want to be clear. The value of the cave was that it was Avraham's. There wasn't an intrinsic value to it that was known in the world beforehand. Avram was just overcharged for a cave, and he went ahead and he bought it, and then its value went up. Then its real estate value went up. Then it became on demand. Then other people wanted it, and even until this very day, the sons of Yishmael claim the cave of Machpelah as their own, as they do for most Jewish holy sites. But Avraham, it's almost ironic that the reason why the Torah talks in such detail about his negotiation and transaction for the purchase of this cave is to make it crystal clear that he bought it fair and square. Right? As you know, when you buy real estate, it's yours. That's just how it works. He bought it, public deed, public record. And it didn't take too long, unfortunately, for people to start questioning that. But that's the negotiation he has. He buys it, and he's able to bury his wife Sarah there. Okay? Interesting note that the Torah records the birth of Rivka before the death of Sarah. So Rivka is not yet part of the family. Rivka is going to marry Yitzchak later on in this week's Parsha. But she's not part of the family, but her birth is still recorded in the Torah. And the reason I saw from the Siforno and the Baal HaTurim is that there's a tradition that a righteous person is not taken from this world until his or her successor has been born. Isn't that a beautiful idea? Based on the verse, the sun rises and the sun sets. First, the sun rises before the sun sets. So before a great person is taken from this world, Hashem already sends their replacement. So Rivka, who is going to be the wife of Yitzchak, was going to replace Sarah in that sense as a great Jewish leader, and that's why the Torah records that. I would say on a broader level as well, we know the concept that Hashem sends what's called the refuah before the makkah, the healing before the hit. So when Hashem has to take any kind of character trait of justice in this world, and he has to give us a challenge or a difficulty for whatever reasons he might have to do that, he sends the answer before he even sends the problem. Now the answer doesn't necessarily mean we see that answer. We might not see that answer for X amount of time, depending on what the decree of Hashem is. But the seed of salvation is always planted before any challenges come down to this world. The seed is already there. First, Hashem says, I'm going to set up the solution, then create the problem. I read that's the way, that's a special way that Hashem treats the Jewish people.
So how do you find it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, so this doesn't help us understand how to find it, but it gives us a little bit of encouragement to know that Hashem is always taking care of us. And sometimes you will see this. Sometimes I have no doubt that you will all or have seen a time when you have a big challenge and you come to realize that Hashem set into motion the set of events that was going to lead to the solution to this before the problem even came up. It's not so hard to see that. I think as with everything that has to do with divine providence, it's in our court to open our eyes to see Hashem guiding the world. We could also choose to intentionally close our eyes to Hashem running the world, and then it becomes much harder to see Him. That's another conversation, but our emunah, the amount we're looking out for Hashem, will be the amount that we see Hashem in our lives. I once gave a class to some college students when I was living in Israel, and they were on a trip, some kind of Jewish trip for a couple of weeks, and I was one of the teachers on the trip, and I was talking about the idea of divine providence. And I said a story that I'm not remembering now exactly what it was, but it was an unbelievable story that shows the clearest hand of Hashem you can possibly imagine. Like almost an open miracle, but not an open miracle, but it was so crystal clear that Hashem guided these events. And it was somewhat well received, except for by one young man who was not having any of it. He was not having any of it. And he started to tell me in really mathematical terms what the probabilities are that such an event would happen. And he was throwing numbers out. The chance of this happening at that time is, let's say, 1 in 10,000. And he was doing all the math to show that even though statistically it's not so likely to happen, the statistical possibility does exist. So I had a little back and forth with him, and eventually we just continued on. And I went to chat with him after, and I asked what he majors in. Statistics. Statistics. So my point in sharing this is I'm not judging that story. I'm not judging him. He majors in statistics and doesn't come from a Jewish background and doesn't have a well-developed sense of emunah. It's very understandable that God created the world that we can always look two ways. And even if we have a background in faith and we have a Jewish background, we also struggle to see Hashem in certain circumstances. Sometimes we do more and sometimes less. So, we don't judge anybody at all. But it's clear that the more we look for Hashem, the more we will find Hashem. That's all. Sure. That's the way it is. That's the way it is. So Hashem sends the solution even before He sends the problem. The seed of salvation is always being planted. Many times we see that the salvation comes from the challenge itself in a way that we never could have never imagined. All right, so let's move on with the story. So he buries Sarah, and the next part of the story is that Abraham sends Eliezer to go find a wife for his son Isaac, for Yitzchak. So he makes him swear that he's going to go, he's going to fulfill this task. He says he doesn't want a daughter from the women of Canaan, rather go to another land and go to a land of my family and find a wife for my son. So he says, okay, he commits to do it, and he goes out. So now Eliezer is a God-fearing individual as well, and he knows that he has a big, important task that he needs to fulfill right now. So the first thing he does is he prays. He prays to Hashem. He says, Hashem, please help me on this mission that I'm taking right now to go find a wife for my master's son. And I want to read to you something so interesting from the Archaim. Such a powerful message that there is, that I see here. So in chapter 24, verse 12, that's when Eliezer gives this prayer. Vayomer Hashem Elokai Adoni Avram Hakrena lefanai hayom va'asei chesed im Adoni Avraham. Hashem, God of my master Avraham, may you so arrange it for me this day that you do kindness with my master Avram and help me find a wife for his son. So the Archaim explains that Eliezer was confident in the righteousness of his master, of Avraham. Meaning to say, he had no doubt that Avraham's prayer for a spouse for his son would be fulfilled. Avram himself had asked Hashem as well. Avram recorded a few verses earlier in chapter 24, verse 7. Hashem Elokei Hashemayim asher lekani mibeis avi me'eretz meladi v'asher dibar alei Hu yishlach malachai lefanecha. Avram said, Hashem, who took me from my father's house, from my place of birth, he will send an angel before you to help you find a wife for my son. So Eliezer, in his prayer, was not questioning that Hashem is going to answer Avram's request, and that Avram is well worthy of finding a worthy son for his son Yitzchak. So why did Eliezer add his own prayer that he should be successful in this mission? So he explains that sometimes, even if a prayer has been accepted by Hashem, and Hashem is willing to fulfill a request, the prayer is held back from being fulfilled because the messenger to whom the matter was entrusted isn't considered unworthy of having it fulfilled through him. So therefore, for sure, Hashem accepted Avram's prayer. It could still be that Eliezer wouldn't be worthy of being the middleman for that holy act of finding the spouse. So Eliezer wanted to make sure he was worthy. So his prayer was to Hashem, Hashem, please let me be a worthy agent for this mitzvah. That was why he wanted to give a prayer. And I think there's such a powerful lesson here, because Hashem sends salvation to people through middlemen, through agents. He doesn't rain dollar bills directly into your backyard. And basically, almost any blessing you have in your life is being sent through some kind of middleman. It might be your boss, and it might be your sales from your business, and it might be an inheritance you get, and it could be a lot of different things. It could be a doctor, it could be a therapist. There's all kinds of ways that Hashem sends us what we need. But even the person whose job is to carry it out in this world, he has to be worthy. So like the way I think about this is, we all want to be good messengers for Hashem. We want to be a kli, a vessel. Or maybe you could call it a pipe. We want to be a pipe to help Hashem bring goodness to this world. So if we're trying to help someone else out, we should daven, Hashem, let me be a worthy and holy and clean vessel to bring goodness to this person. Because I'm sure that person deserves the good. That has nothing to do with me. That has to do with them. That has nothing to do with me. But don't let anything get in the way because I'm motivated the wrong way, or I have some kind of sin or something that I've done that's getting in the way. Let me be a worthy vessel. So I think we can learn from here the value of that, the value of asking Hashem that you should be a good vessel to carry out His will in this world. Okay, so
are there any brachas in our daily davening?
That's a great question. Are there any brachas that we daven that have to do with like kind of this role? That's a great question. I'm not thinking of any offhand. Birchas HaShachar, the morning blessings. We say different blessings that we should be well received by people. We shouldn't hate people. People shouldn't hate us. But not directly this. I like that one. So you're going to have to do this one in your own words.
Yeah.
Which is okay. Which is okay, just like Eliezer did. You have a good precedent for that.
Hashem prepares our footsteps. Maybe.
Right. Maybe. Yeah, I'm sure there's got to be things that hint to this concept. All right. So Eliezer creates a test. What's the criteria? He needs to find a way to determine whether any girl that he meets is going to be a good match for Yitzchak. So here's what he says. He says, Hashem, first he davens that he should be a worthy messenger. And then he says, I'm standing by the spring of water, by the well. Right? In those days, there was wells that people would draw water from. And it would be like on the outskirts of the city. And girls from the city are coming to draw water. Maybe men are coming to draw water too. I'm not sure. But he's looking for a wife for Yitzchak. And he says, let it be the girl to who I ask, can you please give me a little to drink, will say, not only will I give you to drink, I'm going to give your camels to drink. And that is a Baal Chesed, or Balas Chesed maybe is the feminine of that. The biggest criteria that we're going to look for someone who's going to enter the household of Avraham Avinu is going to be her character trait of Chesed. That is going to be the most important one. That's what Avram stands for, and that's what's necessary for a wife for Yitzchak. So he's looking for somebody who goes out of their way. Ideal chesed is done 100% all the way, not in the bare minimum way. So we're looking for somebody who's going to give camels to drink, which is a pretty intense job over here.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get more to that a little bit in a moment, okay? So then I will know that that's a good spouse for Yitzchak. And the Torah says, what an unbelievable instant response from Hashem to that prayer. Vayehihu terem kila ledaber. Vehine Rivka Yaitzetz Asher Yulada Lebesua Bas Milka Ben Milka Eshes Nachar Chi Avram V'chada Al Shechma. And it was that when he had not yet finished speaking, that suddenly Rivka appeared, came out, and she came to fill up her jugs. So he literally didn't even finish making this prayer to Hashem, and boom, girl shows up. Rivka shows up. Okay, so he goes, he sees a girl, he's wondering maybe whether this is going to be the one, and he says, "Can you please give me a little water from your jug?" And she said, "Drink," and gave him the drink. And then when he finished drinking, she said, "I will draw water even for your camels until they have finished drinking." And she took it and poured water into the
Trough.
Yeah, trough. Is that how you say it? Trough. In order for the camels to be able to drink. I saw there's a lot of discussion about the nuances of all that she did. We'll get into some of it, not all of it, but I saw that as an example. That way of giving camels to drink would ensure that they could all drink at the same time. Otherwise, you'd put one jug from one camel, and the poor 9 other camels, there were 10 camels total, would have to wait till one is done to refill it. So this system made that they could all drink continuously as she poured more and more. That's just like one little nuance of this chesed. So this is a pretty incredible kindness that she did. Now it is said that when she drank water, when she pulled water for herself, there was a miracle and her jug filled on its own, meaning to say the water rose up to her jug. That's what it says. She descended to the spring, filled her jug and ascended. I'm not sure which word the rabbis learn it from, but it's clear that a miracle happened and the water rose up to her. So she didn't actually have to put much effort into filling up her own water. But when she went to fill up the water for the camels, that miracle stopped. And then she had to work really hard. Okay? Somebody notes here, the translator of Rav Hirsch's commentary notes that in their first drink, 10 camels would consume at least 140 gallons of water. Okay, that's quite a lot of water. Right? That idea that she poured it for them all to drink at the same time, I see here is from the Kedushas Levi. Okay, it's another level. So what's the deal with that? Okay, we're going to get to understand why did this miracle happen for her and not for the water that she was pouring for the camels, which is when she needed the miracle much more. Right? Her own drinking, what's it going to be? A few liters, a few cups, give some to Eliezer, but for the camels, that's where the real hard work is. So we need to understand why the miracle stopped at that point in time. Okay? So, let's see if we have anything else to share here. Okay, so let's understand this idea a little bit. Actually, one part of understanding this is to understand the next part, which is, let's just continue the story for a second. So he introduces himself and asks who she is, and she says where she comes from, daughter of Besuel, and brings her home to her father Lavan. And now they go meet. Lavan sees this person who is coming home with his daughter, and invites him inside, gives them something to eat, and asks, who are you? What's your story here? And then Yitzchak Eliezer says the whole story from the beginning. It's incredible how much real estate of the Torah is being used on this story, because it could have just said that Eliezer said what had happened, but instead it records the whole thing again. I'm a servant of Avraham, and Hashem blessed Avram with a lot of good things, and then he had a wife, Sarah, and she had a daughter, Yitzchak, and now I'm looking for one, and I came, and he says the whole thing. I prayed to Hashem, and I said, Hashem, please make me successful. And I prayed to Hashem, and I said, this is the test we're going to do. We're looking for a girl who's going to draw water for the camels, not only for herself. And then your daughter came, and that's what happened. The whole thing is recorded in a lot of detail. Okay, so let's dive into this a little bit and understand. Obviously, if it's being recorded, there's lessons that we are learning. The Torah doesn't waste time or words or paragraphs, particularly so many, just to record a story for the second time. Okay, so let's look at this idea a little bit. I'm gonna say over the story with a little bit more understanding. So when Eliezer davened, even before he finished davening, Rivka had approached and came to the well. Eliezer went to her and asked for a drink, and she gave the drink. Why? But it says there that Eliezer ran towards Rivka. Why did he run? Nachmanides, the Ramban, explains that when Rivka went to draw water for herself, the water miraculously rose up to her, and she didn't have to exert herself to draw it from the bottom of the well. So Eliezer was kind of excited about that. You know why? Because if a miracle is happening for her, she's a righteous girl. Mm-hmm. So, but that wasn't enough. It clearly wasn't enough. Eliezer was still unsure whether she was right for Yitzchak. So I heard this idea that asked, why was that the case? What more do you need to vouch for her righteousness than watching a miracle happen for her? What else do you need? So the answer is that even though at this point Eliezer knew that she was a tzaddikas, that doesn't mean that she's a good spouse for Yitzchak. Yitzchak needs a balas chesed, somebody who will push herself to really do a tremendous amount of kindness, of chesed. And if not, it doesn't matter how righteous she was, this is not going to be a match for Avraham's household. Okay, now the Ramban says that when she started drawing the water for the camels, the miracle stopped. And she had to do that all manually. Doing it manually is a lot of effort. And the reason why she had to do it manually is because she wanted to do the mitzvah of chesed by herself. Imagine I walk around all day doing chesed by performing miracles. Yay, yippee, look at me, I'm making miracles. I'm not doing anything. If I push myself and I sweat it out and I schwitz and I push and I pull and I draw and I really help, that is a love for chesed. So she wanted to do the mitzvah with her own hands. And that's why she put in all that effort, and only then Eliezer gave her some jewelry, which was an indication that he obviously felt that this was going to be a good one. So now they go home together. Now they go home to Lavan and Besuah. Eliezer knew that he has not clinched the sale yet, so to speak. If the parents aren't going to let her go, then she's not going to go, even if she's willing. So you got to go convince the parents. So he goes and he tells them this entire story of basically Hashgacha Pratis. You're not going to believe this. I needed to go. That's why he says the whole thing over. I needed to go find a spouse for my master's son. And I prayed to Hashem, and I said, Hashem, please show me this sign. And the moment I said that, your daughter walked up and literally did that. Like it's the clearest hand from God. A very compelling argument to go home to her parents with. Like, come on, this is divine. This is clearly the plan of Hashem. But when he told over the story, nowhere does it record that nuanced wording that implies that Eliezer, a miracle happened for Rivka and the water came up on her own. So let me ask you a question. Okay, follow my logic here. If he's trying to prove to this girl's parents that this match was a match made in heaven, why are you saying a story of divine providence that basically could be attributed to a coincidence? Okay, you just finished praying and she showed up. Why don't you say the miracle part, the open miracle part, that an open miracle happened for your daughter? That's pretty impressive. So that's a question to think about. Why did he leave out that detail? Everything I'm telling you now is an idea I came up with a few years ago. I'm reading off my own writings, okay? But I think it's a nice idea. Mm-hmm. So this is what I thought then. Maybe Lavan and Bethuel would have believed that the miracle happened, that the water came up for their daughter Rivka. Okay, does that mean that she's good for Yitzchak? Maybe basically you're giving me a nachas report. You're coming to my house and you're telling me, hey, I witnessed the miracle happen to your daughter. Thank you so much. Yeah, I know she's pretty righteous. She's amazing. Yeah, that's my little tzaddikas, Rivka. Miracles happen to her. That is not necessarily going to be compelling that this is a good match for Yitzchak. And this goes back to what I was saying before about emunah. This ties in very well. If you're looking for emunah, emunah is everywhere. If you're looking for Hashem, Hashem is everywhere. If you want to block Hashem out, go right on. We have free will to do that in this world. You can blind yourself all day to the open hand of God. That's the capability we have. Lavan was not a great person. Lavan was not a great person at all. So maybe he wouldn't know that this was really a match from Hashem. Maybe he would just think that that miracle is happening only for Rivka. But eventually Lavan realized that this was from Hashem. Because the Torah says, Me Hashem yatsa hadavar. The Torah says that Lavan said, this matter came from Hashem. Chapter 24, verse 50. Vayan Lavan uBethuel vayimru Me Hashem yatsa hadavar leinuchal daber elecha ra'aytaif. The matter stemmed from Hashem. We can neither say good or bad. Hine Rivka lefanecha, kach velech. Rivka is before you, take her and go. We're not going to stop you. So eventually he realized this. So what made him realize this? What made him? He's not such a tzaddik that sees the hand of Hashem. So here's the idea. On his own, perhaps on his own, Lavan would not have seen the divine providence of this story because he wasn't a man of faith. But when Eliezer told him all of these details and told him all of what happened and pointed out to him in the clearest way that this is not a coincidence and it must be that Hashem's guiding hand was here, eventually that emunah hit him in the face. Eventually he is, tripped over the truth. He realized that it's right in front of his face and it must be that this truly from Hashem. So for Eliezer, it was always simple. It was always understood. He was able to see the hand of Hashem right away. For Lavan, he had to be very well, I don't know if it's educated, he had to really be explained the story in detail from beginning to end until eventually he couldn't deny it anymore. Maybe a part of that is because the miracle of Rivka stopped and she had to exert herself to do the chesed, which was basically exactly what Eliezer was looking for, is somebody who's going to push themselves to do chesed. Maybe that's part of it as well. So even if someone isn't looking for Hashem, sometimes Hashem comes knocking on the door. And we could help that. We could help that. I think it's a very special way of spreading the light of Hashem when you're talking to someone to tell them about Hashem. Even you just saying something so simple like, I was struggling with this and thankfully Hashem helped and helped me resolve that issue. You're just planting emunah seeds into whoever you're talking to. It's not all us. It's not all about us. It's God. I would say even doing this with non-Jews is a very powerful thing. We're spreading our awareness that we know God is here and God is in our lives and God is, guiding our lives and bringing us where we need to go. So we're all on a different level, on how much we see Hashem naturally and how much we need to push ourselves to finally see the guidance of Hashem. But we could always try to work on this more and to share this light with others as well. Okay, the last part of the second to last part of the parsha is that they start traveling, and now they take Rivka, and they're going back to the house of Avraham, and on the way they go, and they see Yitzchak is davening. This is one of the big biblical sources for prayer, as well as the source for the afternoon prayer of Mincha. Vayetza Yitzchak lasuach basada lifnos erev. Isaac went out to supplicate in the field, to pray towards evening. That means before evening. That's where we learn the prayer of Mincha from. We learn Shacharis from a morning prayer that Avram did, and Ma'ariv from an evening prayer that Yaakov did. And Yitzchak in the middle was the role model for Mincha, and he showed us this beautiful idea of going out into the field and praying there. And then Rivka sees, and a sort of love at first sight, Rivka sees how distinguished and special this Yitzchak is, and how he looks as he's praying. And she comes, she gets off her camel, and they meet, and they bring her into the house of Avram, which is now referred to as the tent of Sarah, even though Sarah is already dead. Sarah had already died. But the Torah says Yitzchak brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother. He married Rivka. She became his wife, and he loved her. And thus Yitzchak was consoled after his mother. It's very interesting. He got a consolation of the passing of his mother once he found his wife. But another idea that the rabbis teach us is that there were miracles that happened as long as Sarah was alive in her tent. One was that a lamp burnt in her tent from one Shabbos to the next, and her dough was blessed, and a cloud signifying the divine presence was hanging over the tent. There was a bunch of things that showed the holiness of the tent of Sarah, but when she died, these blessings stopped. But the second Rivka entered the tent, as we said, she was kind of took over that role of Sarah. All these blessings came. It was another sign that she was a worthy wife for Yitzchak. And that's just about the end. The Torah very briefly talks about how Avram did in fact remarry after that and had a bunch of children. Married a wonderful woman named Keturah. She had a lot of fine qualities, and he had a bunch of kids with her. And then it talks about the generations that came out of that, but we're not focusing on that. This is how we've been doing it since the beginning of Parshas. We quickly go through parts of the descendants of a family that need to bring us to a certain point in Jewish history that the Torah wants to tell us about and focus on, that will teach us lessons. So it does that, and the same with Yishmael, Avram's other son, who was the father of the Yishmaelim, which is the Arabs, lists their descendants going out many other generations, and that close the curtains. Close the curtains. Parshas Chayei. That is Parshas Chayei.